Hello and welcome to the third episode of the IBM Support podcast, You, Me, and IBM. One of the presents that Alex and I got this year was walking into the support center last week and seeing that Carl Drayton was in town for the Christmas holiday. Carl is a treasured member of the IBM Global Support Center. In this episode, we touch on aspects of this job that affect everyone, from what customers teach us to how we learn and project confidence. We also find out that both Carl and Alex were a bit surprised about where they would be working when they got hired. I had not even gotten the microphones hooked up when Alex and Carl got into a deep discussion about networking, which could have been an episode all on its own. Thanks for listening.
VNIC is big now. SRV is the new type of cards, and they stand for, I believe, Single Root Input Output Virtualization. And VNIC is created off of those cards. I would say out of all of the cards and technologies, that's probably one of the fastest, because with VNIC, you write directly to the card itself. Okay. So when you think about an SCA, an SCA uses old school virtual Ethernet connectivity into partition over the system bus connectivity. Mm-hmm. And then once that traffic gets, say, from your guest partition all the way to the hosting partition, which is VIOS, then VIOS has what's called a shared Ethernet adapter that has a virtual component, a physical component, and puts it out to the network. Going through that path, you got multiple copies of a file, of a frame. So if you start with the IBM, you got a copy. Go to P-Hype, you got a copy. P-Hype goes to VIOS, got a copy. VIOS goes out to the network, a copy. It's like 4 or 5 copies of a frame, which can slow down the transfer. But with VNIC, there's only one copy of the frame. It goes straight from the line description directed to the adapter. So you get rid of all of the other copies of the frame, which helps you have faster throughput. So VNIC is kind of the buzzword for clients that want to have faster throughput. But
is that a problem with error checking? Like if there's not enough copies of it, could that be if you lose one, is it a problem?
Nah, it's more that
because you can retransmit.
You gotta write it to memory. So every place that holds it does a mem copy. I mean, that requires cycles. That takes time. Whereas with the VNIC, it doesn't go through a lot, which is why it's generally faster. So when you hear clients say, you know what, I want to get as much throughput as I can, VNIC is the way to go. However, VNIC, the way it's designed from a failover perspective, it kind of can take them a little bit of time to actually fail over. So in the world of IT, a second is an eternity.
Right.
So in VNIC, if it takes you 2 to 3 seconds to actually fail over, imagine 3 seconds worth of time that can be lost. You don't have those failover issues going through an SCA because everything is virtual. Nothing never fails. So it's kind of, you got to cross what's most important to you. Is it speed or reliability? And how long does it take you to actually fail over? Because things do occur, outages, things break down. VNIC, it takes a couple of seconds because the way it is designed. So
is that like a common call that you guys get?
Yeah, we get a lot of VNIC calls.
Is there a way to help customers not shoot themselves in the foot with respect to VNICs?
It kind of depends. Some clients will say, you know what, because VNIC has what's called a backing adapter and VIOS is involved. So you got a VNIC client adapter, which goes to the IBM. And then you have a VNIC server adapter, which goes to VIOS. And then you have a backing device, which is also on VIOS. So VIOS is involved. The backing device is what gets you the link statuses from the network. So if a network switch is down, a cable is broke, that backing device is notified, which in turn triggers VIOS to notify P-Hype and all of that type of stuff. But some clients will say, you know what, I want 10 backing devices. I want to be, as secure as possible or have as much redundancy. Mm-hmm. But the more backing devices you have can sometimes take longer. So it's kind of like the reverse effect.
Takes longer to get the stuff through because
it takes longer to kind of sift through, and there's priority involved, which backing device has the highest priority and all that type of jazz. So, it's a lot. But VNIC is good, but it depends on what you're looking for. You can use SRV, those cards. It can operate in dedicated mode or shared mode. In shared mode, what that means is that I can take a physical port and I can split up into multiple logical ports, and I can assign the logical ports to individual LPARs.
Okay.
Clients use that a lot. If you go that method, you don't need VIOS at all. And some of our customers are more IBM specific, don't have BIOS skills.
Right.
So the solutions you give or you offer them will be determined upon what type of skills you got. If you got VIOS AI skills, then you don't mind maybe going through VIOS because you got an admin and knows how to work VIOS.
That's for a lot of people, VIOS is like almost an impossibility.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so different from what they're used to. They're like, give me some other route.
But that's interesting that you say, like, take the solution for which you have skills in that area, because, you know, that happens with database access all the time, too. It's like, well, what program should I write to access DB2? It's like, well, I don't know, what programming skills do you have in your organization? Like, do that.
You got to take that. And again, you know, business partners are great, but you don't know those conversations that they be having. You don't know if they trying to get more sales and say, well, you need this files. You need all of this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know how those conversations go, but a lot of our clients, some are just only know the I. And having them to learn VIOS in that Unix type of environment is a lot for them. So if you can give them a solution that's strictly IBM based, which is what SRV and shared mode does, they're happy with that.
When I was in print, taking a lot of print calls, I'd often have a customer, they'd have an issue, they'd say, I want to get from A to B. And when you get good enough at something, you can ask somebody, what is the way that you want to do that is best for your business? And so for the way that the end user wants to work. Because there's always going to be more than one way to get somewhere, but if they're not familiar with it, or if it's going to take them extra steps, or if they don't want to be dealing with Windows or whatever, but it's only when you get good enough at something, like you are with networking, where you can actually make the call to say, okay, I can offer them this solution, and that's actually going to work better. It might not be the best solution, but it's the one that will actually work for the customer.
I heard a joke this morning. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
Why didn't the Terminator upgrade to Windows 10?
The Terminator? No. Why?
Hasta la vista, baby. Not bad, right?
Oh, man.
It's all right. It's okay.
Welcome to You, Me, and IBMI.
But Carl, all that comm stuff seems like heinously complex, and I'm very glad that you know what you're doing and have answers to all those crazy questions that I suppose you guys get over there. But where I sit across the partition, it sounds like a bunch of those dudes. Yeah, they're all dudes, but it sounds like a bunch of them are studying on comm. How's that been going? Like, go ahead and name names. Like, if they're just not good learners, just let me know. You can share.
I mean, we're doing cross training. So we're learning console stuff.
Oh, you guys are learning. That's right. Okay,
we're learning console stuff. We're learning access client solution stuff.
Oh, really? They're gonna. Oh, wow. So console, and you guys are learning the ACS client as well.
That is correct.
Wow. And what do you think of that?
We're being cross trained.
Is your knowledge going to be too diluted? I mean, is that just too much to know?
I mean, to me, I'm more interested in the console stuff. I mean, so my time here, I've been going down to the lab, getting on the front panel,
all right.
Shifting through those SRCs,
65, 25,
65, 25, 21 to move through.
Yeah.
Then you got 21 and 11 to set. So going through that education there, being on the comm team for now, 19 years, I started July 2005. I never really had access to the front panel.
Yeah.
Very limited.
Yeah, we didn't in print either. It was
I don't know the last time I touched one of those things.
We wouldn't even tell, in print, you don't even tell a customer to IPL. You're like, oh, I lost my entire QSFlow subsystem. Just create a copy and IPL when you can. It's print.
It's interesting because I was talking to Peter, and Peter
You go for the ethical treatment of animals?
No.
Oh, Peter.
Peter, my teammate Peter. He made his 6-year anniversary. I think yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was explaining to him that when I started, like I said, in 2005, our remote support functions was totally different than what they are now. Now it was AOS. Then it was WebEx. Now we're on Teams. All of these visual remote client sessions we can have with clients. Yeah. But back in the days, not to sound like an old fella, we had Start Remote Support.
Yeah.
Right.
And part of Start Remote Support. Some had dial-ups. Some had VPNs. And then we had the backend system, the RS systems, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that was used to gain access to a client system. So they couldn't see what you was doing.
Yeah.
But
It was all recorded, though.
it was all recorded.
But not now with Teams. I don't think that's. I don't think they can record that anymore.
They're
We
not
certainly don't
supposed to.
record the video of it.
Technically, you could record it, but I think our, we try to not have that, right? Because
I think if it's not in process yet, it will be that they might not allow us to do that
okay.
if it's with a customer.
yeah.
But I know the only way I could do it. Sometimes I'd be doing one and I didn't really know how it worked real well, so I'd use OBS and I'd record it that way just for personal learning. And I'd ask the customer, "Can I record this?" But now we don't do that. But before it was for like security, like so that we wouldn't be able to like do something nefarious and wreck somebody's system.
And you had to have. So there was pros and cons to each. You know, the Start Remote Support was good because you was able to get on the client system, move around, fix the problem, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But now with these new type of
Once
sessions,
you got it set up.
once you got it set up. Now with these new sessions, the clients can see exactly what you're doing. So if you take control, they can actually see, okay, I'm doing a work subsystem.
Sure.
Okay, I'm doing the net stat. Whereas with the old method, they just kind of heard your keys hitting.
Yeah,
Because they didn't
true.
really see exactly what you was doing. So
Right, because you'd be on a different session. You weren't on their session. You're on your own.
Yeah, it seemed like developers were a lot more comfortable with Start Remote Support and getting their own session directly to their system.
Well, it's
and
much
twiddling
faster.
Bits right there.
Yeah.
Well, it's faster.
Even
and
over
they
a
have-
phone line, that's
they
going to
have-
be faster than WebEx or Teams and much more.
it was
Felt
it
better.
was a different way of getting in. And then if you needed like a specialty type of connection like Piranha, then you had to provide a developer temporary access to your remote support system. And then you would have to go through the options to get to that Piranha IP address that they would use for their Mako systems to make that connection through your remote support connection. So things have changed. But my point is that with the dial-up connections, you had to use the front panel in order to tag the card. In order to be like, okay, I'm going to use this card as a dial-up and RSF connection. You had to tag the card. So that was the only view we had to the front panel. And that was, as time has went on, became less and less and less and less and less. So it's interesting that now with this console cross-training that I'm on the front panel and I'm doing the 65, 21s and 11s and 21s and 11 and resetting the adapter. So I kind of like that aspect of it. The ACS stuff is cool. You know, the GUI, the plug and play.
Yeah.
But the console stuff I kind of like because that's kind of like, it has a comm element.
Well,
and,
and
that's
it feels,
and that's on my alley.
it feels real. I mean, when I moved from Power VC into Save Restore, that's the first thing I did. Is I went down to that lab where you found me that day, and I was there for like 2 months. It felt, it feels nice to get closer to the system when you can.
It's another thing too is that it's always, and I'm pretty sure you guys probably feel the same way. Sometimes a lot of our clients that we deal with know more about the system and function than we do.
Oh,
Because we always late to get stuff, number one, and they get it early. So when you work in these calls or these PMRs now, these cases, and you want to end with somebody that's knows more about it because they have more exposure to it, it always puts you a little bit behind. I can touch these front panels now and have that type of experience. Now we can actually have some conversations as opposed to saying, looking at some screenshots.
Right.
Do this for me, do this for me, and hopefully it's following the same thing that they're doing.
What I used to tell customers is they'd be doing something and they'd say, "Do you want to take over? We'd be on a remote or whatever." And I'd say, "No, customers actually know how to use the system. We just know how to fix it. But you have the actual knowledge." So
That's true.
some, lady working in an accounting department is going to be way more familiar with just flying through those screens than I am trying to find whatever maybe print or save option might be available. I'm like, please get me there. Plus, then when they're doing that, you can see how they work. So you might see something they do where you can suggest something different, or they might do something where you're like, I never thought about that. Like, it was years. I probably worked here 5-6 years before I realized instead of running work spool file to work with my spool files to find something, the guy's like, this customer was on why'd you do that? He's like, just run a work job and take option 4. I'm like, what? I'm like, it never occurred to me. And then ever since then, I do that. You know, and like some other customers was the first one that told me that if you hit F9, you can recall previous commands. But if you go too far, if you hit F8, you can go the other way. I didn't know that. I mean, so the things we find out from customers are very useful.
Yeah, using the system is like such an awesome way to learn, you know, and taking cases. I mean, have you taken a lot of console cases?
I've had a couple.
Okay, because like, you know, back in the day, we worked a lot of PMRs per day, and I felt like a medical resident, right? You know, you have these long days where you're learning a lot. You're working a lot of cases, and I don't know. It's just a great way to learn. And I'm kind of bringing it back to the folks that are cross training on console or vice versa. It's like the education that you're doing is not on the job training like it used to be. It seems like it's shifted to you go in front of a console and play with the thing. It's just more traditional style of education than on the job training. That
your best teacher is to get to it.
Yeah.
Like this, you can only read so much, but the best experience is actually going through it. So now that I worked a couple, but the more that you work, I think the better you'll end up.
Yeah,
it's always to the individual as well. Some people, you know, may shy away, may run away from taking these issues, but if you just go and head in and just say it's going to happen how it's going to happen, eventually you start building up that rapport. You'll start getting better and better and better and better and better, and the next thing you know, it will become second nature. So the console part, you know, it's a little bit challenging because with the SRCs and all of that type of stuff, but it does have a comm element to it. Once they put on the network, you need IP addresses. That's my wheelhouse.
Right.
So that aspect I'm comfortable with. But again, you just got to get to it. One thing I did like, I was a big fan of the live calls. I used to like getting on that phone because you never know what's coming through the chute.
No.
Yeah.
Never.
You never know. Like with, you know, now with the
That's
call,
fun.
That's a real fun.
And that's the exciting aspect. You come in, maybe you start at 8 and you're rolling in at 8:01, you know, on a certain day, whatever. But when I first started, I remember I was talking to one of my first best friends here. I mean, it's amazing when you start a job, the last thing you think is that the person you're going to most hit it off with is a 7-year-old guy who's been here for 30 years.
A 7-year-old guy?
A 70-year-old guy who's been here for 30, 40 years, knows everything. I mean, you don't think about it when you start. Your best friend when you start a job might be someone who's twice as old as you.
Yeah.
And I remember it was Roger Tangen when I started. And it was getting to the time after my training where I was going to start taking live calls. And I went to him and I said, Roger, I'm kind of worried when I start taking these calls. Immediately, I'm sure after I say, IBM Global Support Center, this is Kurt, how can I help you? The next thing that they say is something I'm not going to know. And I'm immediately going to feel like an idiot. What do I do about that? And just like you just said, he said, just take calls. Just take calls. Everyone starts, they don't know what they're doing.
Simple, sage advice.
Just take calls. And so like you said, I love that light. You know, I love picking it up. You don't know what's there. It could be exciting. It could be funny. It could be
I'll tell you a story.
Something crazy.
I'll tell you a story. First started, just got through the foundations. The teams were just merged. Because at one point, you had
what teams were merged?
TCP and Peer.
Peer.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot about Peer.
TCP was a separate. TCP and Peer were separate teams, but we was under the same manager. So once they merged the teams, you know, we was on one ring. Because TCP had a ring. It was 45. The number 45 on the phone. Or the Q ring. Yeah. The Q number. And Peer was 30. So once they merged it, you know, we took 30. So now you couldn't. Both calls came through. So you didn't know if it was a TCP call or was an SNA call. So TCP is my background. That's my strong suit. Yeah. You know, SNA, I'm just learning. So one of the calls came in, and then the guy, he knew I was raw. And the answers I was giving him wasn't confident. And he said, Carl, are you sure? He said, are you sure? And each time he said, I'm sure, I got less and less sure.
Because he knows you're not right.
He knows I just started. He knows
well, he could
I'm
be
great.
right, but it's like he's not confident.
Right,
So,
sure.
so I had to reach out to a colleague, and it was Win. I said, "Yo, Win, can you take this call for me?"
Yeah.
Win took the call. So I tell everybody that's new, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You can say something that's completely wrong, but if you say it with conviction, they'll believe you. You can say something that's completely right and say it like you're not too sure. They're not gonna believe you.
Right.
So he said, "Are you sure?" 3 times, and I never forget that guy. And then ever since then, I said, you know what? I just got to say it with some conviction.
Oh, you know, I have a different approach actually. When I don't know what I'm talking about, I'll just straight up admit it. You know, I'll say I don't know the answer to that question. But
if you don't know the answer,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
That's true, but
Because-
that's a little bit different than you might know the answer, but you're not 100% sure the answer. There's one thing if you know you don't know the answer at all, then I agree with you. I don't know it. Hey, Mr. Customer, I don't know the answer.
Right.
Is it okay if I get back to you, do some research? That's one thing. But it's one thing where you might be 85, 90% sure the answer, but they're still at 10 to 15%, and that's how it comes across like. And that's where
Are you sure?
my example, he was like, are you sure? I thought I was sure. And each time he said it, I became less sure. So
yeah, and customers are they're different, right? Some of them demand confidence.
and he was from he was from upstate New York, so he kind of had that little East Coast, I'm gonna mess with you a little bit type of thing.
Although you're from the East Coast too.
Yeah,
You're
I'm from New York City.
You're from New York City. That's
Oh,
right.
And this
okay.
guy was from Endicott, which is upstate New York. So he kind of wanted to play around a little bit at my expense. But that's when I was a young buck though. So now that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen nowadays.
Yeah.
Well, and now that you're going to be taking cases with cons and things like that, that confidence comes into play because a lot of things you're telling them. If you're telling them, here's how to configure an SRIOV adapter, it's a lot different being confident about that than being confident about, do a D manual and press the white button.
Absolutely. Tell me what you see. Read them codes. You got to give it some time. I might be too fast to the trigger. It might be too slow. So you just got to be a little bit patient with it. But a lot of times I found out that I don't think a console case would be, I could be wrong, but I can't really see them being like a 7-1-ish type of problem. Because typically this system it depends on the scenario.
Yeah, they might be trying to rebuild the system and not be able to find their console.
It could be like that. Or the system could be up and they want to change the IP address of a console. During my times here, since, cons has an IP element, we get some cases that have come our way because anytime you say anything TCP/IP, it goes to the comp team, regardless of which application is actually using it. So over the years, we'll get questions from customers that say, hey, we're moving our system for point A to point B. We're changing networks. What are the best steps to ensure we have a console once we plug in the new site? So now going through this cross training is like you can pre-configure the IP address.
Okay.
You can have all of that set up, saved, so that when you power up, if the network is configured properly, you should be able to come up on that new LAN.
Yeah.
So now those kind of questions now kind of makes more sense because now I have to think about those things. Now before it was, okay, this is a cons question. Let me get you over to the console team.
Yeah.
Well, now that's part of me now. So now I got to, have some answer of what's the best method to actually do that.
But over the years, there's some funny stuff that happens, like where different kind of cases get shuttled to different places. In print, until probably 2003, 2004, if we needed to take a COM trace for a printer, we would conference in COM. And now that's just laughable. Like, obviously, you just learn how to do that and do it, but we would conference in COM for that. And now I look back and I'm like, that's pretty weak.
There's a lot of teams in the center that have COM elements where collecting a trace and doing some preliminary trace analysis is required. Then obviously, the COM team, we can help out for the deep dive.
Yeah.
Once we got to start looking at it, from a more
the low layer stuff is
deeper analysis type of perspective, and that's where we come in. But And everything is TCP/IP nowadays. You know what I mean? So all the teams, a lot of the teams got the ability to run trace tools to analyze some basic stuff before it starts to get higher up to the application level.
Well, and there's stuff too, like if we take a trace and say, I'll use print because that's such an easy example for me, but if we take a printer trace and it's slow or whatever, we know how to take the trace, but we have to come to COM because we might not be exactly sure, why it's retransmitting. We know that it is, but, the little things like that are
another thing too about the traces, like every team might have a specific way how they want to collect traces. So you might collect the trace, but that might not be how we would have collected the trace.
Right. Like, for example, do you tend to use StarTC?
Trace connections that we use.
Trace, what is it called?
TRCCN.
Yeah, so I use TRCCN mostly. There used to be another one.
Just Start Communication Trace.
Yeah, Start Communication Trace.
That's what you guys use mostly, right?
And that one doesn't drop packets, right? Something about that? One of them used to drop packets once in a while, so I wouldn't use it.
I mean, so it depends on how familiar are you with the system and what's fastest. A trace connection is faster because it captures packets for all IP addresses on the system. Okay. So you don't need to know the specifics.
You don't need to know the line description.
Yeah, you don't need to know it. So trace connection is easy that way. You know what? Do a trace connection. Leave it wide open. It's going to capture everything.
Right.
So that's the easiest to kind of get. The Start Communication Trace has a benefit in that where it captures its packets at. A trace connection only captures packets at the IP layer. A Start Communications Trace captures it at the adapter layer. So depending upon what you're troubleshooting, you might need that adapter information MAC addresses. Okay. That's in the Start Communications Trace.
That's right. Those are not in trace.
Those are not in the trace connection. So if you got a situation where for some reason packets are being forwarded to the wrong gateway, you're not going to know that in the trace connection. But in the Start Communications Trace, you can say, okay, this is our destination MAC address. And MAC addresses, part of the MAC addresses has a vendor ID. This belongs to Cisco. Sure. Okay, this belongs to, Juniper. Okay. So now you can say, okay, this is where this is going. Go to the networking person. He'd be like, no, this is supposed to be going to Juniper, not Cisco. Oh, then something's going on. So it depends what you're troubleshooting.
So Carl, like I always have customers take TRC-CNN traces. Should I not be doing that? Should I be revising my instructions to Start Communications Trace instead?
Not necessarily. Because in order to do a Start Communication Trace, you got to know the line description. Clients might not know that. So you might need to sysnap.
Yeah.
And then you got to look at the routing table information to know, okay, which line do I need to point to?
Yeah.
Also, with a Start Communications Trace, the default buffer size is 32 meg. You got to go in System Service Tools in order to allocate a bigger buffer for use to set.
Okay.
So if you got to do 2 or 3 different things,
all right,
it might be better just to do a trace connection.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep rolling with that.
That's why I said you got to, it depends on what you're trying to troubleshoot. Now, some people...
If you need MAC addresses for an IFS problem, then yes.
So you got to go into SST, allocate a bigger buffer, which I believe is up to 4 gig. And then you can come to a Start Communications Trace. You can say, okay, now I need a 64 meg, 128, 256. So you need more details.
Yeah, that's a lot
to do that. So that's why I said if it's just quick and easy, trace connection.
Yeah.
One thing with the trace connection too, though, and it seemed like it's been an issue for years, but if you put too much filtering, whether local IP address, local port, remote IP, remote port, protocol, if you do 2 or more, you're going to get unpredictable results.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
So what we say is just pick one thing. So if it's the remote address that's most important, put that in there. If it's a port,
not the port.
If it's a port, local or remote, put that in there. But only put one filter.
I wonder.
Once you put multiple filters, because you're trying to make it smaller, I'm gonna just put remote IP, local port to make it smaller.
Yeah,
that's good in theory, but the results might be no packets at all because the tool gets a little bit out of whack sometimes.
That's good to know.
And also, when we're setting up traces, we usually say, we have our mantra down like trace connection, hit F4. Put the name of the trace as trace or whatever. We never care. And then we'll say, arrow down 2 times and add a 0. So it says 160,000 instead of 16,000.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm going in and saying, maybe use a specific port. Should they be adjusting that how should they be adjusting that? Or should they be saying, look, make it 64 megs?
So
How should they be adjusting that if they're only going to be using one filter?
So if you're going to use, I have a standard size for all trace connections for most scenarios.
What is it?
I use 1 gig.
Okay, I said 300 meg because I find that like a 300 meg trace will generate about a gig spool file. And I mean, in some situations, you need more than that because
You're dumping out to a spool file and not PCAP. See,
yeah. I usually do a spool file because you get a bunch of TDE information, a lot more
there
details.
You go. So it goes on what problem you're chasing.
oh, I didn't know that.
If you're chasing a performance type of problem, those TDEs become important because now you can see which jobs are involved.
Yeah.
If it's not a performance issue, then I really don't care about the TDEs, and then I could, have it dumped to a PCAP. So it depends on what it is you're chasing. If it's performance-ish, then if you got service docs, you got job watcher, what do they require? You got to know the jobs involved.
Right.
And you get that from writing it out to a spool file because the trace connection spits out the COM trace. It also creates a lick portion. The lick portion has the actual TDEs and who they're associated with.
That's the QPCS MPRT.
That's correct. That has the lick information which contains the TDE. So it depends on what you're trying to chase and what you're trying to troubleshoot. Also, too, what some might not be aware, a trace connection is really a subset of a lick TCP trace. So when you do a trace connection, you're really doing a trace internal for TCP/IP. So a trace connection has 2 trace points. You got 0800, which is an inbound trace point, and you have 08531, which is an outbound trace point. So if you ever looked at a trace connection and you see, a trace point of 08531, that's going to be a send frame. 08600 is going to be a R, that's going to be a receive frame.
Is that only going to be in the spool file when you're looking at it?
It's going to be in the QSys print spool file.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So it's going to be in that. And then you can take the TDE for that frame and use the lick trace to find out which job is sending frames, which job is receiving frames. So if you're troubleshooting a performance issue, I say just print out the spool files. That way you can have that information. If it's just a regular, ping timing out or
why isn't this
a connection is not established, then you can just dump it out to PCAP file. But what I've been doing nowadays is have them just dump it out to spool file anyway, because when I bring it back, we got tools that can convert it.
Yeah.
Because if I need that stuff, it's still there. Yeah. Once you put it out to PCAP, you can't reverse it and get that link information.
Right.
So it's better to have it to begin with, convert it yourself, because you still have access to that, as opposed to say, you know what, Mr. Customer, we got to do this again because we printed the PCAP,
because I told you,
and I don't have that TDE information. So.
I've been nailed by customers that'll have like some serious problem, and it's a COM layer issue of some sort, and let's say it's on an upgrade or something like that, and they have to revert the system back because it's a problem in a production system. They got to revert that production system back to an early release or something like that. And we only had a window of like an hour to gather diagnostic materials, right?
Yeah.
And let's say you get a trace, but it's a COM layer problem, and you only get a trace of one side of the conversation.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Customer, you're going to have to experience that production outage again so that we can get the correct traces. Oh my God, that sucks.
That's why a lot of times too, sometimes filtering is a bad thing because you can't go back. If you filter for something specific and either they gave you the wrong information or the problem has changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, if you filter for something specific, that trace is useless.
So Carl, you're back in Rochester. Do you miss it?
When I come in the office, because you don't have these conversations. Like when you come to the desk, and now you got people talking, you can hear different cases, different problems people are working. You put that in your memory bank and say, okay, I've heard this. You don't get that when you're remote because everything is slack.
Right. And how many years did you live in Rochester?
14.
Okay. And now you've been back on the East Coast for what, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now?
5 years.
All right. And which do you prefer? Or do you, I mean, is that too personal? I don't
No, I mean,
I don't know if your mom and dad are listening to the podcast. Really.
no, it's both the same. It's both the same. You know, Minnesota, for 14 years. Didn't think I would be here for 14 years, but I like what Minnesota offers.
Yeah.
I like what the East Coast offers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Coming here and getting that, you know, that ice on Saturday kind of brought everything back. You know, don't miss that aspect of slipping and sliding on glaciers. But, you know, it's cool.
You live in a cold climate, though.
Yeah.
And growing up in New York, that's cold.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
cold.
now
I don't think New York is
these.
that cold.
It's-
New York is not
well,
that cold. Is
it-
it?
We will
it-
see
it's-
snowstorms rolling now, and New York is just getting dumped on,
But it's-
and Minnesota is not.
But it's not as cold as Minnesota.
Yeah.
Like, Minnesota can get, when it gets rolling, it can get negative for consecutive days.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
7 days, 10 days. New York could get below zero and then it'll go up. It doesn't stay at below zero. And plus the wind chill, it's really tough over here. Like I remember one year, it was like minus 25 or 30. With the wind chill, it felt like minus 75. And cars couldn't even start.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, they had to get boosts because that's how cold it don't get that cold in New York. It don't get
And
that
if it
cold.
snows there, the snow doesn't stick around for weeks, right? It's gone in a matter of days, I would guess.
No, it can stick around.
Oh, can it? Okay.
It can stick around. Now, different parts of New York. If you're talking like
Yeah. There's
upstate New York, like
Right,
Buffalo, I mean, some games,
Yeah.
you know, they got to make some adjustments because of all of the snow that they get in.
Snow.
You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, when the Buffalo Bills played the San Francisco 49ers maybe 3-4 weeks ago, you know, they had to, you know, pay fans to kind of
Oh yeah.
shovel out the stands.
And
because that's how much
they
snow
did
got.
that at Lambeau. They pay them, I think it's $20 an hour
Yeah.
to come and shovel the stuff down to the field, and then they get it out. We're actually talking. It's interesting you mentioned that because about the whole kind of where we're from aspect. Because we were talking last week to Holly, and Holly grew up near here,
Yeah.
and she went to college, and her college roommate was Paul Steinmetz's sister.
Oh, get out of here.
So that's how she wound up here because, John came down and was like, hey, you should apply at IBM.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how she wound up
Okay.
in Rochester and, getting an interview there.
Uh-huh.
But you are not from the Midwest. You are from, what, Brooklyn?
No,
I thought you were from Brooklyn.
no, I'm from Harlem.
Oh, you're from Harlem. Oh, okay.
Which is a section in the borough of Manhattan.
Okay.
So, and Queens as well. I can't leave out Queens. Did all my schooling in Queens.
You did.
So
Okay.
I can't leave out Queens.
And did you study IT in school or?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing.
Yes, I did. That's an interesting story. So I would say late 90s, I was working for a company that resold telephone lines for business. Worked there, kind of like that. Was taking live calls. It was a call center taking live calls. And my supervisor at the time got a job at another startup. This startup was called On-Site Access. And what they did, they provided voice and data services for clients. Working there, supporting, internet connections, because it was a level 1 ISP. There's different levels of ISPs. There's
What's
level
a
1,
level 1 ISP?
low level. So Charter, I don't know the numbers now, but there's a level 1, there's a level 2, there's a level 3. So level 1 gets its IP addresses from level 2. Level 2 gets its IP addresses from
okay.
level 3. Everything's a network. Level 1's network. Level 1's network is level 2. Level 2 network is level 3, and that's how you get out to the internet. So level 3 is where you get out to the actual internet.
Gotcha.
So they gave us a script of some questions to read the clients. Hey, can you ping? That's when I learned ping. Can you ping? Can you do this? Can you do this?
That's fine.
And I memorized that script so well, people thought I was very good.
Yeah.
But I just knew
Well, yeah, you are
I knew them 10 to 12 questions very well. That's what I said. Once you get your routine down,
Yeah.
knew it very well. So it was there, seeing the network operations center and how those guys worked, and what I was doing with my little ping tests kind of piqued my curiosity that I wanted to get into networking. And then 9/11 hit, because I was in New York when 9/11 hit, and had to find a different job. So at the urging of my mother wanted me to go to school, that's when I went to school for networking.
Okay.
Oh.
And then once I went to school for networking, I went to a technical college called TCI, which stands for Technical Career Institutes. Went there for 2 years, so it's kind of like a DeVry, that type of school.
Sure.
Got my associates there. And then at the urging of my mother again, she said I should go for for my bachelor's. So I went to Monroe College, was in the Bronx, not too far from Yankee Stadium, off of Fordham Road.
What's the name of the college again?
Monroe College.
Oh, Monroe College.
Monroe College. Went there, completed up the bachelor's in computer information systems, and then graduated, was working for the school. I was working in the IT department, getting the systems, fixing systems for the students, getting system prepared for the next semester. And then I got a call from Jean Brown.
You did?
Got a call from Jean Brown. And
Why?
She saw my resume.
So you said I gave me a resume.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, out of the blue? Like, why?
She's like an alumni,
Yeah,
and somebody's
yeah.
like, somebody set up this computer just right.
They had my resume in the database.
Dude, they didn't even need to interview you. With your experience and knowledge, that would have been like a.
But here's another funny part to that story too. So, the lady, I'm not Jean. The lady was like, the job was in Rochester. I said, oh, that's great.
Yeah, I don't even have to leave the state.
Rochester, New York is about 5 hours from the city, 6 hours from the city. She was like, no, Minnesota.
Yeah.
You're like, there's a Rochester, Minnesota?
She said, have you heard of Rochester? I said, no. I said, no. And then they flew me out for the interview and got the job, and the rest was history.
Oh man, I went to a job fair in Milwaukee after I graduated from college,
Mm-hmm.
and the hiring manager there, the IBM, Rawls Walden is who
Sure.
it was. But he told me the job was in Rochester, and I was like, great, I get to move to New York. I've been living here in the Midwest my whole life. I'm ready to see something new. And he's like, no, Minnesota. I was like, okay.
So yours is the opposite.
Yeah,
really
yeah.
funny.
I would have liked to live on the East Coast at some point, but whatever. I have a family now. Rochester's a great place to raise a family.
It is.
Well, IBM's really lucky that you took that call from Gene Brown. And I just appreciate you wanting to take the time out of your day to join us to do this today.
Not a problem. When you ask me about it, if we can make it happen, we can make it happen. I had a good time.
Yeah, me too. It was fun.
I had a good time. I had a good time.
Thanks, Carl.
No problem.